So let's make sure our app works again. And for that here, I'm back on the front end now. I first of all need to use that new data the backend returns for logging in or for signing up. In both cases, we return an object which has a user ID field, which has an email field, and which has this very important token field. So here to auth log in, thus far, I passed my user ID. Now, of course, I can still pass this. It just now lives in the user ID field instead of the nested user object. So we can simply change this to user ID and it should generally work again. But with that, we're not taking advantage of the token. Still, with that, if we try to authenticate with that new user, which was created after we changed our password hashing logic on the backend, if we click login here, we are redirected. So this now at least works again. We're not crashing our app anymore. Nonetheless, this is not all. I also, of course, now want to use the token we are getting back from the backend. So to log in, I will also forward response data.token, both here for our login mode logic as well as for our sign up logic. And in app.js, where I have this login function, I therefore now no longer just expect the user ID, but I also expect the token as a second argument. Now, of course, I want to manage my token here in state, and actually instead of is logged in, I will store token as a state here and set token, and therefore call set token here and set this to the token I'm getting as an argument. And on logout, we can set this back to null. And therefore here, where I check for is logged in, I can simply check if token, because if token is null, I'm not logged in. If it's something truthy, like a string, which it is, then we'll make it in here. Else, we'll make it into here. And then here at the bottom, where I set is logged in on my context object, I can set this to token with a double bang in front of it as well. And therefore, this will be converted to true if it is truthy. So if it is a string, if it is a token, and to false if it's falsy. So if it's null or something like this. In addition, in my context, I also want to store the token itself though. So this is just a convenience property here, which gives us a quick answer to the question whether we are logged in or not. I want to store the token itself as well though, because later when we send requests from certain places in the app, we will need that token. Now to be consistent, I will therefore also go to the context, to the auth context file, and here in our setup also add the token as a field to the default value. We never really use that default value, but it's better for auto completion if we reflect the actual values we'll have in the context in the end here as well. So now we're storing the token in the context and we're storing the answer to the question whether we're logged in the context, just as before, just with a different logic. Now we can utilize this token to attach it to outgoing requests. So for example, when we create a new place, so in the new place.js file, we're sending a request, and this is a request which needs a token, because on the backend, in the places routes, we are protecting all routes below this middleware here, and that, for example, includes the create a place route here. So we need to add our token. And if you check our middleware logic on the backend, you see the token has to be part of this authorization header. So here, when we create this request, when we send it, in the end, the send request function here we have from our custom HTTP hook takes a headers argument. So here I want to add my headers, which is an object of key value pairs, and I want to add the authorization header here and set this to, important, what I expect on the backend, bearer, and then my token. And this bearer thing is really just a convention to identify this kind of authentication, basically. So I'll set this to bearer, white space, and then my token. And we get that token from the auth context, to which we already have access here. So auth.token. This header now needs to be attached to the request, and we should be able to create new places thereafter. So if I save this, and I log in again, and make sure you use the right email address, which you used to create a new user after you changed your sign-up logic and hashed the password. If we now go to new place, Marienplatz, still a nice place in Munich, Marienplatz 1 in München, and we pick our image, if I click add place, we're getting an error. And we're getting an unauthorized 401 error. Now we're getting this error for an options request though. And such an options request, if we inspect the network tab, is indeed sent. You see that when I try to create a new place here, it sends a request, but please note that the type here is options and not post. But we clearly are sending a post request here. Well, that's just a browser behavior. For certain HTTP verbs, basically anything but GET requests, the browser automatically sends an options request before it sends the actual request you want to send to find out whether the server will permit this to be sent request, so to say, if the server supports the to be sent request. This is just a convention, this is just something the browser does, and we just have to be aware of it. And we have to handle it. This options request has no token attached, and it doesn't need to. So in checkoff in our backend middleware, before we try creating the token or getting the token, I want to check if the request method is equal to options, and if it is equal, I will return next and allow this request to continue. This will not allow the post request to continue, just this options request. So this is a required adjustment to ensure that our options request is not blocked. The actual post request, which then triggers our place creation logic, will still be validated. So with this change on the backend, now if we try this again, this looks way better, and we created a new place here. Now what you'll notice, of course, is that if I try to delete this place, we fail because authentication failed. And that makes sense because we're not yet attaching the token to this request. The same is the case if you click this update button here. So we need to attach the token to these two requests as well. This definitely is a great practice for you, so feel free to try this out on your own before we'll do it together in the next lecture.